Hey everybody, we're live. Welcome and introducing you to my friend Warren Logan. Warren, the fellow I could- fellow
DCRP.
DCRPer, DCRPer, fella. Yeah, welcome. How you
Thank
doing?
you so much for having me.
Hey, honored to have you here. You're running for City Council District 3. Uh, Tell us about Warren Logan.
So, hey everybody, I am Warren Logan. My background is in city and regional planning from the Department of City and Regional Planning at Cal. I have been working for the government off and on for 15 years now. So when I say I know how to run cities, it's because I've been doing so for a very, very long time. I'm an Oakland resident. I'm really excited to just continue investing in my community and really helping my neighborhoods grow into thriving, livable communities.
What was the aha moment for you? You said, all right, this is it. I'm going to run.
Yeah, thank you, Zenny. I think one of the biggest aha moments was watching a number of the businesses that I had helped during my leading the COVID response in 2020 and 2021, 2 years later, starting to close. And in fact, sharing with me their frustrations that the programs and policies that I had set up during COVID to help them were now being wound down and that they were still in this, sort of radical time of need. And I feel like Oakland is sort of experiencing this.
About what you put in.
So go ahead. Go ahead.
No problem.
What I was doing as I was actually putting this on Twitter, and so I had to put out just to let everybody know that we were talking. So I forgot to turn the sound down. So go ahead, please.
You're great. But seeing a number of the people I helped still looking for help and leadership and not seeing that happen, whether from the city council, from the mayor's office, or from staff, and recognizing that I played a role in helping them, and I want to continue doing that. At the same time, I bought a home here in West Oakland back in 2020. And while I've seen some improvements in our neighborhood, I'm continuing to see the same challenges, whether illegal dumping, blight, homelessness, car break-ins, you name it, still happening, and not seeing the types of improvement I would like to see. And so I said to myself, well, I have fixed a number of these issues in the past. Let's go back and really continue to try and help the city that I love so much.
So what ideas and solutions do you tend to bring to office if you win?
Yeah, I really think that the city should focus on 3 areas. I think our district especially should be clean, safe, and vibrant. It is really just that simple. Kind of back to the basics, right? So in terms of cleanliness, I want to end illegal dumping, I want to address homelessness, and I want to stop graffiti. When it comes to safety, I want to drastically improve our public safety outcomes. And I don't think I'm surprising anybody by saying that is a central focus for anybody who is serious about running the city. That includes decreasing police response times and 911 wait times, coordinating our city resources with the county and the state and the federal government so that we are all rowing in the same direction. And this is sort of my pet passion, is making our streets safe for people to walk, bicycle on, take transit, and even drive. Anyone who's done any of those things in our city knows that it can feel very dangerous to move around and be active in our city. I want to address that. The last piece is vibrancy. People move to Oakland, ideally, to be in Oakland. And I think right now we're in this spot where we've forgotten our luster, our excitement, our livability. I want to support our local businesses and bring back life into our center. And just to remind folks who are watching, District 3 includes West Oakland, the Port of Oakland, Uptown, Downtown, Old Oakland, Lakeside, and Adams Point. We are the center of the city's economic force. Most of the jobs are here, right? The transit centers are here. All of the BART lines, all of the AC transit lines, the ferry, the port, all of the freeways come through this district. And so in many respects, we have to hold the center. And what happens here really sets a tone for the rest of the city, I think.
Are you originally from Oakland? What's your background from that perspective?
Yeah, I'm actually not originally from Oakland. I've lived here for 10 years, but I grew up in San Diego. San Diego is a slightly more conservative city than Oakland and even the Bay Area. And what really drew me up here in the first place was going to graduate school for city planning and ultimately moving to Oakland in a place I call home now, because as a gay Black man, there are very few cities in the entire country and maybe even the world that feel safe for that intersection of identity. And I feel like the city is very welcoming to lots of different kinds of people and their backgrounds. And I want to continue to invest in a community that supports my intersectionality as well.
Hey, bro, since I just got a death threat about 2 hours ago, hey, just how about just being a black man?
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
I know.
Wow. Hey, so what do you feel is the reason that over the years you lived in Oakland, it has degenerated to the point where I had a friend today who works for the city tell me, "Oh, you don't want you just this is awful. It's terrible." And then realizing who this person was talking to, clipped their words. What do you believe happened to put us in the state that we're in today?
That's a good question. I want to start by naming that Oakland, like many cities, has gone through cycles. And we are unfortunately in sort of the down cycle. And ideally, we're hitting the bottom to go back up. But it is not that long ago that a lot of people saw Oakland as that it kid, right? The place that people wanted to be and live and vibe, right? That was just a few years ago. And I think for many, 2019, 2018, 2017 was a version of that upswing where people said, wow, it is the year of Oakland. So it is not like the days of past are decades ago. We're talking about like just a minute ago, things were looking good. I think what has caused this challenge, and I want to name the first piece, COVID. We can't just pretend like a pandemic is something everyone can just get over quickly. I will say, though, having been in charge of a significant portion of our COVID response, I am very proud of the fact that me and my staff were able to keep the city, frankly, whole and held during a time when I think a number of people expected us to fall apart in 2020 and 2021. And I believe what we are now experiencing is the hangover of that lack of leadership as a number of Oakland's leaders, city administrators, and policy directors and former mayors left the city. Mm. To answer your question more directly, I believe, and this kind of is the cornerstone of why I'm running for office, is that a major reason that we have found ourselves in this position, one that is acutely more dangerous perhaps than it was before, is because we have elected some leaders whose greatest claim to fame is not having experience doing the work that we expect them to do. And just as a quick aside, I think many of your listeners, your viewers will understand this, right? I'm an outsider and I know how to get things done because I've never worked with or for the government. There is no other job that you can get away with saying that and have people expect to take you seriously. I'm going to fly this plane, but I've never done so before. I'm going to drive this bus and I don't have a driver's license, right? And so the thing I'm running on is demonstrating what competence looks like, what decades of city planning experience looks like, and really raising the bar on what people can expect from their city leaders.
Let me ask you, because you said you're an outsider, and
no, I'm not saying I'm an outsider. I'm saying that a number of people who are now leading the city have started their campaigns by saying, elect me because I'm not part of the team that is the city. And
Gotcha.
while I can understand that narrative, right, because you want to kind of set yourself apart from whoever's running the city at the moment, the challenge that I'm putting on voters is to consider whether you are voting for people in spite of their inability to do the job that they are tasked with doing, right? My background is in city planning, in policymaking, in budgeting, in governing cities. I've done that for multiple cities. And I am up against someone who has said, I don't know what I'm doing. And so can we really be surprised then if we're not getting the outcomes we're looking for from someone who is telling you that they don't know how to do the job, and in fact showing you that they don't know how to do the job?
What do you think of the new police chief? I know Police Chief Mitchell's brand new. He's from Lubbock, Texas. which and where the average salary was for police was $55,000, and you were could be a victim of violent crime for one out of every, I think, 19 people, where in Oakland it's one out of every 12. Uh, there's some other differences as well. For example, it's 72% white. We're 32% white, right? But what are your thoughts on the new chief, preliminarily?
Yeah. I want to withhold my criticism of someone who hasn't even started the job yet.
Mm-hmm.
I want to celebrate that the mayor and the police commission has hired someone. I think that that is a good show of success, that we are finally turning the page on this effort. I do want to flag for your listeners and viewers that we've had a police chief this whole time. Chief Darren Allison has been working with the police force for 25 years. And I think the mayor's even said this a bit too, that while ceremonial in some ways, we have had a police chief. And the reason I share that is, one, to remind people not to take away, his luster and the work that he's dedicated to the city for 25 years, and to acknowledge that a police chief alone is not going to resolve the litany of public safety challenges that the city faces. And I urge Oaklanders to understand, and even Bay Area residents to understand, that while, yes, having a strong leader in place is critical, it cannot be the only thing that we rest ourselves on moving forward. There is a lot of work still to move forward on, including policies that your city council should be moving forward on, and similarly, efforts that your mayor can do as well. So to answer your question directly, I'm excited and I wish him the best of luck. And I look forward to working with him in the future when I become city council member.
You didn't mention the Chief Lerone Armstrong. Your thoughts?
I enjoyed working with him when he was the now former police chief. I am disappointed that he was fired in the first place. I think a lot of Oaklanders are. And I am also disappointed in the time it took for us to get here, right? It's now been a year of wanting a police chief. And I kind of remind people, though, that, again, even if we had brought him back, like let's play that out for a second, Oakland would still have a number of challenges. And so I don't want to take away from even his hard work and his years of service. And I also want to acknowledge, again, that we cannot rest all of Oakland's future on one person. That is reckless and irresponsible.
Here's why I asked, because this goes back to 2 years ago plus, got a tip just before the mayor went to her inauguration that she was going to seek to replace Chief Armstrong. And I wrote about this in zenny62blog.com. All you have to do is go there now and then type hit job in the search, that the mayor was going to make up a reason to get rid of him because she ultimately wanted an Asian police chief, which was interesting assertion. And so I wrote about it, and it was talked about to the point where I received just recently an email from a lawyer representing a law firm in Sacramento that represents the city of Oakland, who asked me openly where I got the information that was in that post, and did it come from OPD? I said it did not, which told me that to some degree I'd hit home, that indeed it was a hit job, and that perhaps I outed somebody else unknowingly in what was written. And that's where I'm coming from. The reason, my point is that it's not as clean, his ouster, as surface would present. And so that's why I was wondering why you were thinking of it in terms of the rank and file that's on staff. And I think you being well, I don't know you, but I'm saying that it seems to me you're a normative person. In other words, you see the structure, You say, this is the structure, and here's how we work within the structure. Granted. Am I right or wrong?
I think that's right.
Okay, yeah. And that's why I was asking about that, and then presenting why I asked Chief Armstrong so that people could understand where I
Sure,
was
that
coming
context.
from.
Yeah. I,
Yeah.
I don't think I'd be surprising anybody by saying that I thought he did a good job. I think a lot of people, especially in the police force and sort of the neighborhoods that he really represented, he's from Oakland, um, was showing a lot of progress in a way that we hadn't seen before. And I don't want to take that away from him. And part of the sort of pragmatic policymaker that I am, I try and acknowledge where we are today, right? The mayor has said she's not going to hire him. The police commission offered an opportunity for her to recant that, and she said no. And so, in some ways, it is, forgive me, but almost immaterial what my stance is on him now, because here we have someone new that we need to work with and we need to support. And that, I think this kind of goes back to your original question of like, what are some of the challenges that Oakland faces in its, circuitous nature, that it doesn't really progress in a way that I think people should think it would. And I think it's because, and I have spent a lot of time talking with a lot of Oaklanders, and it's something that is really dear to my heart, but a lot of people have a nostalgia for a time before today, right? And everyone has a different point that they mark as the best days of Oakland, whether that was 2019, whether that was 2006, whether it was 86, right? Or 56. Everyone looks back to a moment when things were better. And I think that that's keeping us stuck from envisioning a city that we can grow together, that people keep saying, no, I want to go back to this time. No, I'd prefer to go back to this other time. And to be honest with you, we're not going back to any of those times. And so the more that we can acknowledge that reality and to align ourselves with what potential futures exist for our city, the sooner we can get to one of those. And so that's why, while I like to use the past to understand how we got here, I don't like to dwell on it for too long, because I think people can get stuck there in a way that is not productive.
When you get in office, what will be the first thing you do?
What a good question. I really appreciate having transparency in the government. That is in fact why I've tried to work for, whether as a staffer or as a consultant, for every level of the government. I like to understand how all the pieces, just as you said, work together. And then I like to share that information with as many people as possible, so that when you ask me to do something about that problem that you see, or to envision a future, I can tell you, here are all the levers. Which ones do you want me to turn? Which knobs are we pushing, and so on? The first thing I'd like to really work on with my fellow council members, there will be 8 of us, I'm one of 8, is to set a scorecard. What is it that we are trying to address in the next 2-year budget cycle? And how are we going to hold ourselves accountable? How are you, the public, going to hold us accountable? And by extension, how can we work with staff to demonstrate success? And I want to give you an example of what that should look like for each department. A few years ago, our former fire chief, Reggie Freeman, he would tweet every single day, and anyone can look this up. If you go to Reggie Freeman's Twitter account, you can see him tweeting every day the run stats for the fire department. And he just said them neutrally. Here's where we went today. We had 300 runs this week. 30% of them were for structural fires, 10 were for EMS, 20% were for encampment fires. I'm just letting you know that we are doing our job. Now, I recognize that not every department has such instant daily stats. That's fine. But I do believe that if you are not able to tell your community or even your local representatives what it is that you do well quickly, having managed a number of these departments, I worry that we lose sight of the ultimate goals that we're trying to achieve. In the case of the Department of Transportation, how many miles did we pave last year, right? How many miles are we going to pave in the next 2, 3, 4 months? And ideally, as a policymaker, it is not to just hold staff accountable or even myself accountable, but to identify why it is or how it is that we can meet our goals faster, cheaper, more effectively, right? I'll give you another example of why numbers matter here. A lot of folks in Oakland will tell you we need to be picking up trash better because illegal dumping is a problem. Having supervised the Department of Public Works, they would share with me month over month how many tons of trash that they would pick up. And the numbers were bigger and bigger. So on one hand, you might say we are more successfully picking up trash on Oakland streets. We're winning. But if you measured that number against people's complaints, which were also going up, we soon realized that we had trained people to dump on our streets, that we were encouraging people's bad behavior. And so while one number was going up, it actually meant that our policy, our strategy, was sending the wrong signal. And so it helped us understand like what ways we could pivot our environmental services programs so that we were sending the right incentives and consequences to people. And that's why, again, those numbers matter, so that we can show people, okay, we're making progress in one direction, but here's what the narrative is behind, you know, the up or the down of any one of these strategies that we're looking at. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Curious. We've had over my years of Oakland, which go back to April 8th of 74, and then living at Adams Point since 1997. Actually, before that, 1991. What am I saying? Come on, Zinni, get your act together. When I moved from night and moved, back and forth. But anyway, we've had some council members that focused on just West Oakland, others that focused on downtown, West Oakland, and to a little bitty bit Adams Point, Grand Avenue.
Mm-hmm.
What kind of council member for District 3 will you be?
Yeah, I'm glad that you asked that. And I want to frame maybe a bit of that question, which is that every couple of cycles, we also have redesigned the boundaries of the district. So I want to kind of remind people what this district is now versus even the district that Carol Fife, who I'm running against, ran for and represented in the past, because that's a critical component. So District 3, like I shared before, includes all of West Oakland and has for the entire time.
Right.
The Port of Oakland, which its dynamic has changed over the last several decades. The waterfront up to Broadway. It used to include the residential area of Jack London below, or I should say south of Chinatown. It no longer includes that. And so that's an important distinction. Similarly, to use your point about Adams Point, I used to live in Adams Point on Orange Street, and while my old residence is still in the district, yeah, right. Most of Adams Point is no longer in District 3. Yeah. And so one of the things that's kind of fascinating about the way that these boundaries have changed is that I believe it forces the council members to work more collaboratively with one another, because District 1, 2, and 3 all meet at Adams Point now, where it used to just be District 3. Yeah. Similarly, where Chinatown and the residential portion of Jack London is now District 2, but the commercial area along Broadway and the waterfront is still District 3, there's a better synergy, I think, that you have to have with your colleague in District 2. The final piece I'll share with you is that until about 5 seconds ago, not that many people lived in downtown Oakland proper. And over the last 5 or 6 years, we have built nearly 10,000 housing units, and thousands of new residents live in an area that people didn't used to live in. And so the reason I share that with you is because I believe, sort of, 10,000 foot level here, that the friction you're describing of deciding whether or not to care about downtown more than West Oakland, or West Oakland more than downtown or Adams Point, was a symbol of how many people lived in each spot. And now that there's, I think, a more balanced level of population, I need to balance all of those different needs. And the last thing I'll share here is that the demographics of West Oakland have changed significantly. a neighborhood or a sub-district really that used to be a bastion of Black home ownership is not the case anymore. It is now far more diverse in a way, which is good and bad, and that it has significantly younger and whiter voters. And so I have to be more cognizant of the mixture of the district in a way that I don't think the previous council members really had to be. And so to answer your question directly, sorry to take this tangent, but frame setting is that I believe it is my responsibility to represent the whole district and frankly, to work collaboratively with the other 7 council members to represent the whole city. I welcome collaboration with the other district representatives so that what happens in downtown can support Chinatown, can support Eastlake, can support Deep East Oakland. Some of the challenges that West Oaklanders face are just the same as districts 5, 6, and 7. So the more that we can collaborate and share on, what our passions are and what our strategies are, I think the better. Whereas what has happened in the past is this sort of home rule effort, my little fiefdom, here's what I'm doing over here, everyone stay out. I don't think that makes for a city, right? A strong, resilient city that is moving forward. And so, again, paramount point here, the more that we are working together, I think for the better and livelihood of our residents.
But you bring up something that's quite fascinating, so I have to ask. There was a gentleman, this goes now back to roughly 2014, 2013, okay, who was known for buying up homes. One moment, please. Hold on a second. One moment. Sorry about that.
No problem.
Anyway, as I was saying, this gentleman was tasked with, on his own, primarily buying up homes and at a bunch, and then kicking out a number of the residents. Unfortunately, a good percentage of them who were Black and elderly, and then reselling them after refurbishment to young white dwellers, thus creating to a degree, the kind of schism that exists today.
Mm-hmm.
How do you intend to navigate as council member, given the existence of that problem?
Yeah, I think that, well, let me start by saying that's bad. Like, I'll just be blunt. I don't appreciate that. Like, let's just start with the basics. Bad. No. And however, I think that what your city council can do is set a playing field and really a tax structure that discourages that type of behavior. One of the things that's interesting that we've seen in downtown, especially as these new, even luxury high rises have been built, is that in addition to the city's general fund soaring because we now have a slightly more stable property tax base, what we're also seeing is that the folks who might have been the target audience of that home ownership practice or really displacement practice are no longer punching down on the housing market. And what I mean by that is if you give them something that they want, I'm waving my hands here wildly, they will stop going for the next best thing, which puts downward pressure on the housing market, right? And so while I'm not necessarily saying we should only build luxury housing, so to be clear, that's not my strategy. I do believe that we need to be offering housing opportunities at every level of the market, all the way up to luxury and all the way down to transitional housing for people, first time getting off the streets. Because otherwise, what will happen is people who come and go from Oakland will look for the best thing they can find for the amount of money they can afford at any level. And if they can't find that, their ideal, they will go to the next best thing. And that means that whoever was in that slot now has to find the next best thing below them. And I want to give you an example of what that felt like when I moved to Oakland in 2013. I was one of 30 people lined up for one apartment at 14th and Lakeside. And what was fascinating was to see how many different kinds of people, young and old, I don't want to say rich or poor, but middle income, lower income, all looking at the same apartment that was built in the 1920s, I want to say, people started bidding higher and higher. Unfortunately, it was a rent-controlled apartment, so you couldn't do that. But growing up in San Diego, that at the time didn't have such an acute housing crisis as we really do here, I had never seen a line of people waiting to see one apartment. And what I realized even in that moment was that a bunch of us would be looking at a different apartment if it was available. But because it isn't, we're all here for the one apartment that's available.
Yeah.
Now, fast forward over 10 years, there are a lot of different types of buildings in downtown, from high rises all the way down to single family homes at varying levels of affordability, varying levels of luxury and repair, but that each person now has an opportunity to sort of suss out where they want to be. And we're no longer doing this, rivalrous exchange of like, let's all try and get this one apartment. It's like having vacancy in the market is actually very good for people who want to move or even just move around in their own district, because it means that you are now in control as a renter in terms of the price, in terms of your opportunity. Whereas the reverse, where there's not enough housing, means that your landlord is in control of the situation and you are not. I think though, Zenny, you had asked about a connection with people buying homes. And this is the part that I like to sort of balance this out, right? Because Oakland is a majority of renter city, and especially this district. One of the things I really want to work on is helping people buy homes, because the underlying challenges that I think a number of people who are renting face is this level of instability that unfortunately can either only be addressed by some pretty strict rental controls and or better opportunities to own and invest in your neighborhood. And so I think we need to do both. And I'll just share very briefly, it's kind of in my family's lifeblood. My grandfather, who passed away last year at 106, was instrumental.
106, wow.
He was instrumental in helping Black and brown families in San Diego, where our family is from, buy homes in red line neighborhoods, right? Helping Black and brown families get into neighborhoods of opportunity that they were never allowed to see. And I grew up not really understanding why everybody knew my grandfather's name until I became an adult and realized that he had helped so many families, aunties and uncles, grandmas and grandpas, right, getting places that they felt stable in. And that I really want to carry on that legacy in whatever way I can.
I have to ask you, is it that, well, given that, because you presented a pipeline that if it worked perfectly, homelessness would be a thing of the past, and yet we've got a tremendous problem. So what's going on that we have that problem if we have this diversity of housing?
Yeah. Let's see where to start. One is that Oakland alone cannot solve homelessness. Homelessness, and by extension, the state's housing crisis, which has really become the country's housing crisis, is all of our responsibility to address. More practically speaking, San Francisco not building enough housing in multiple booms of economic cycles has punched down on the city of Oakland, who has also not built enough housing, and Berkeley, who has also not built enough housing. So on one hand, we need to drastically increase the supply of housing. The 7,000, I think, roughly units we built over the last 5 years pale in comparison to the number the state projects we should be at in the next 8 years. And by that, just to make a comparison, it's 26,000 housing units, not 7. So let's just start with that number. The second piece is our, and this is a strategy that I really want to promote, and I'm not the first person to say this, is we need shallow subsidies to keep people in their homes so that we stop having people end up out on the street. So what shallow subsidies look like is giving somebody,
there you go.
Yeah, is giving somebody $500, $1,000 once at a time of need. Because one of the things we have found year over year is that the people who are homeless and just recently became homeless miss like 1 or 2 rent checks. And we're just short of being in the right spot. But because they lost their job and didn't get a new one fast enough, or their car broke down and they had to make an extra payment in the wrong time of the month,
Yeah.
They were stuck and everything fell apart. And now the city and everybody else, right, all the state actors and the county actors are paying thousands of dollars to help you with services. Whereas were we to have helped you up front with $500, we wouldn't have had any of this, or at least many of these challenges.
I have to add, as an FYI, the new auditor report has informed us that the city has not done a job of informing Oaklanders about the rental assistance programs.
Yeah.
FYI.
Yes.
Yeah.
The adding to this, though, and this is why, the city of Oakland and really District 3 is so critical in this broader strategy, is that to provide money for people means that the city has money to give.
Yes.
I just can't be more blunt than that. You can't give money if you don't got money. And being in a deficit, as we are, one of the core strategies to addressing the housing crisis and the homelessness crisis is to get money to help people. And so that means attracting investment of other kinds so that we can provide the tax revenue that pays for these types of services. And so it's funny, I'll give you just a candid example. I have regular coffees at a coffee shop called Kinfolks, which is on the corner of 20th and Telegraph. And it's kind of the new hip spot for all the like young Black people. It's a very neat space. Cat a corner to that is a new luxury high-rise called Forma. And a number of the people, it's about 20 stories and it's expensive. A number of people who I've met with that are kind of Oakland locals and natives have said, I like this space, but I don't really like that building. I don't like that we built that housing. And I like to share with them, A, the whole punching down effect. Now all those people are out of your neighborhood. Congratulations. And B, and this is the critical part, what used to sit there was a parking lot that probably provided maybe tens of thousands of dollars in property tax revenue.
Yep.
What sits there now is a high rise that pays over $1 million in property taxes. And that form of tax is the exact kind of money that we get to give out for other types of social programs. So I'm not asking Oaklanders to love every market rate building we've ever built. But what I do want them to consider is that these buildings are paying a lot of money for us to spend on the social services that so many of us really believe in. And just to put it bluntly, this is what taxing the rich looks like, and using that money in ways that we feel are really critical to support people living on the streets, people who are structurally homeless, couch surfing and in between places, and then people who are just on the cusp, right? Who are like, I am one paycheck wrong away from being out there too, right? All of that requires money and programming that comes from this type of discretionary revenue that we so desperately need.
Does that mean you're advocating an enhanced infrastructure financing district down there? Because, absent that property tax spin goes to the 5 wins. So is that
it goes to the general fund, right? And then it goes to the maybe the 8 wins, which is the
BART
council members.
Transit. Those goes to BART, AC Transit, the city, the county, and the EB Mud Flood Control District.
Right.
So I'm saying, but if you do tax increment financing under EIFD, guess what? You get to capture the whole thing.
That's right.
You're advocating?
Well, you don't capture the whole thing. You capture the increment on top of it. So, in the case of this Forma building, you would capture the $1 million over the 50,000. So
but that's a distinction, not a difference. My point.
Yeah, that's right.
Okay. So my point is,
the issue, though, is, and this is, I like tax increment finance districts, yes, and I like tax increment financing. That is a good thing. The issue is that you need to have cream on the top to put somewhere. And when you're in a deficit, you're kind of robbing Peter to pay Paul. And that's one of the issues that Oakland has now run into, is that if we're not willing to either upzone a district that is so economically depressed that we would see a collective amount of investment and money to then park somewhere else, then that strategy doesn't really work. And I know that my opponent, Carol, has been a major proponent of enhanced infrastructure finance districts for all of the city. And that is not a good idea, because it assumes that the city has a surplus that we can take from, and we don't.
Actually, if I may, because I'm the progenitor of that. And what happened with that, to be honest, our current mayor on February 2nd of 2002, and how's your time, by the way? Because I don't want to Yeah. Okay. But I think it bears to explain. I'll make it really quick.
Go ahead. I love policy.
She asked me, we're both Cal, right? Go figure. So anyway, she asked me, private meeting she wants to have. What's EIFD? What's tax increment financing? This is Shang. Then she gives me homework, but she doesn't want to pay me. I'm thinking, I'm not going to do that. She says, I have a consultant. I said, why am I in the room, right? Point I'm making. Then she and the other council members, this went from her to Rebecca and Carol. They all started talking about this citywide EIFD in different ways. Shang even ran on it and saying she was using it for affordable housing. The problem, though, is that currently, if you don't do that, even without, here's the thing. If you take that money, in that area, okay, if you do the math, then there's that breakup from the base year, all right? But here's the thing. The county allows you to increase the value of your area by 2% every year. On top of that, there's a natural increase of an average of 6.3%. So even if you do nothing in terms of building anything new, just changeover is going to get you that increase and you're going to get that money. So it's not true that, you have to build only to realize it. No, you don't. The problem and the reason why you're doing it is simply to do what everybody else has done in the history of redevelopment, reallocation.
Right.
So, hey, look, we got all this money going over here. We're just going to bring it back home, but also under AB 464 Mullen, thanks to Barbara Bobby Lopez. If you don't know her, get to know her, great lady. Under that, we can now spend it to help people recover in their businesses, recover from the pandemic. And guess what? Regardless of what we're talking about, Mr. Logan, no one, and we've never used it in Oakland. It's always been just talk.
Right.
What's going on?
Well, I think we like to talk about things a lot. Just to be honest, right? It's it's something that's been really challenging even in this campaign is that I try to regularly meet with people who disagree with me. I think it's good for my campaign and just for politics in general is to understand where there's lines of disagreement and opportunities for collaboration.
So you're not going to make fun of people and flame them online if they have one little disagreement with you. Good for you.
I think one of the challenges that Oaklanders face, and I've seen this across a number of cities I've worked for, is that there is so much distrust in local government and frankly, apathy for the city's ability to deliver on anything that all we are left with is talk. And that what voters expect from their council members, their mayor, is nothing but talk because they don't believe that anything can get done. So I would like for someone who talks like me to talk like me on that dais. And what I'm trying to prove to people as I'm running for this office is that you need to raise the bar.
Being a black nerd, right?
Right, yeah, like that elect a black nerd that actually has done the work. We can get right, like we can go back to the time that I was, managing the city's response to COVID and saying, great, if you want safe streets throughout the city, here's a 35-mile network of slow streets. If you want every business to have an outdoor activity and parklets, here's a free permit system. We did all of that in 3 months. It's possible, but you have to elect people who know how to write policy and know how to govern and know how to work with thousands of staff members across dozens of departments. That is a skill, and it is not one that you can learn in a few months or even just a few years on a council dais.
Well, Mr. Logan, how much more time have you got? I've got another 10 minutes.
I can do 10.
Cool. All right. Closing
I'm
out.
enjoying my time with you, Zenny, so I don't want it to cut short.
Hey, it's a conversation needed to have. That's a good one. So, let me make a note. I invited Mr. Jordan on. I haven't heard back from him. He's actually ducked me a bunch of times. I don't know why I don't bite, especially at this distance. I'll give, Councilmember Fife would love to have her on as well. Hey, so the door is open. My door is always open, as they say. But my mouth aside, let me ask you, um, closing out, how do you want people to think about you as a candidate, and how do they get in touch with you if they want to help your campaign?
Yeah. I want people to know me as someone who is serious and prepared, who is competent, and who is sane. Um, I want people to expect results from their council members and to look at the list of accomplishments that I've completed, even in just the last couple of years, let alone the 15 years I've been a city planner, and consider who you would like to run your city, especially in a time of crisis like this. The best way to reach me is to go on my website. It is warrenforoakland.com. There's a contact button, and I would love your support by
For Oakland or for Oakland, F-O-R?
F-O-R, for Oakland. Great
Right.
question.
Mm-hmm.
And the last piece is, and I think for a number of people who've met me recently, I like taking people to coffee and just learning about their lives. It is something that I really, really like doing, is just meeting with people. And I especially invite people who disagree with me. We've talked about this before. If you think, gee, I don't like Warren, I should ask him to coffee and learn from me, right? Because I think that there is an idea that if we don't get along, if we don't agree, then we can't talk, right? Yet some of my best policies and programs have come from very strong opposition with people who've come to enjoy working with me, right? That is something I really like doing, is working across the aisle, if you will, or aisles for that matter, with people who share the same vision, but may have different pathways to get there. And so I'll leave you with that, I suppose, Zenny, that I want people to look at me as a collaborator and as a pragmatic policymaker, someone who we desperately need in our city council.
Hey, fun talk, by the way. Are you going to get other DCRPers to campaign for you? Is that it?
I hope so. I'm working on it.
Who was your mentor at DCRP?
Karen Frick.
Okay, mine was Michael Teets.
Okay.
Yeah, so I graduated in 1987.
So recently.
Yeah, recently. Oh yeah, I'm only 28.
Right, exactly.
Hey, thank you, Mr. Logan. Don't move a muscle. I got you. Hey, folks, we'll be back with more later. If you are, for those who follow the NFL, we have the NFL competition committee that we discussed yesterday, and we have more coming later today. And if you disagree with somebody, just disagree with them. Follow Mr. Logan's path, but don't send them death threats. Thank you.
Thanks, buddy.
That ends the stream.